Hello and welcome to this new YouTube show. My name is Dan and I'm here with my co-host Arabella. Today we will be discussing numerous topics and the show is about 30 minutes long. How are you doing today, Arabella?
I'm doing pretty good. How
So,
about
uh,
you?
Arabella, what's on your mind today?
Well, I don't know. What I was talking to you about earlier is I just find it remarkable that so many people are getting on YouTube and just talking about what's on their mind. And uh, I hear things that are balanced and unbalanced, but they're at least outside the media scope. Um, People are talking about things in a way that they're not worried about the extremes of the media, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, so you're saying that in a sense the U.S. media is kind of extreme in the things that they say and kind of the edits they take.
Well, I mean, it's become, at least to me, where I didn't used to follow it, it's become obvious that there's an agenda, and I think, uh, of course, on a spectrum, some people are starting to become aware of this that never even thought that was going on. But um, I mean, the only example I can use is I have family members that uh, have no particular bend. They definitely don't have um, a political party or anything like that. But as events have unfolded, they're kind of shocked by the media reaction. And even though they're not being reactionary themselves, they are kind of reacting to the way the media is framing things, and they never realize that. Like they still were operating on some idea that the media is free press, but I think it's become really obvious at this point that it's not free press. That there are um, there are facts that are being repressed, and therefore it's kind of spilled over onto YouTube, where people are just talking about this now, and they're like, "Is it okay? Is it okay to talk about this?" They're not really sure, and of course there are the emboldened people who have no problem uh, talking about it in extreme ways, but I don't think that's helpful. What do you think?
Uh, Personally, I believe a little different from what you just stated. I believe that there is in the United States, and according to the First Amendment, a freedom of the press. But what people fail to realize is that the various news companies and agencies are owned by people that have an agenda of what they want to push on the American consumer. And I say that because the United States of America is now basically a united corporate state. Uh,
Yeah,
Even the CIA is not a part of the government anymore. It's considered a corporation. And on official
really?
document, yeah, on official documents, it calls the United States one of its clients. But that's beside the point. There's one thing I wanted to mention to you, see what your take was on it. I don't think you may or may not have heard about it because the news just kind of glanced over it. Have you ever noticed? You watch the news, they like say something important, and they go talk for 15 minutes about some dude holding an infant. I saw that. But anyway, on Monday, and this is today is December 13th. On Monday the 14th, that's tomorrow. Barack Obama is scheduled to address the nation directly from the Pentagon. What do you think?
Really?
Yeah, in other words,
About what?
it ain't no Rose Garden or Oval Office address. He's going to the Pentagon to address the nation.
I
What
know,
do,
but why?
there's something going down. I think it's either a
Okay,
dec.
well, here's why I'd say that is that when the shootings occurred at San Bernardino, which, quite frankly, in terms of language, I don't even like that language. I consider that a acute terrorist attack, and I think that that is what it should have been said right away. That that's what happened is a terrorist attack, and that's what I'm talking about. I had a couple family members who that's what they called me, and they were like, "What happened?" And, like somehow because I predicted this, and I said, "No," I said, I don't care what they're saying. This is not part of the mass shootings that have occurred because of the media. And I do blame the media for the glorification of mass shootings in America where, maybe unstable people didn't fully have an idea or weren't going to act on it. They made it sound like something cool to do. So they did. Suddenly, when it's in the media, it's like creating weather. They created a storm. So in my mind, I separate that because I consider terrorist attacks that have a political motivation completely different than somebody going out and glorifying violence for the sake of violence. That is not what happened in San Bernardino. So I'm going to say that first off. It pisses me off. They lumped that in, and the Obama administration went way out of their way to the last tilt that they could possibly do. They didn't want to admit it, that this was a genuine terrorist attack. I mean, that was following ideology based on ISIS. It doesn't matter whether ISIS put them up to it or condoned it. They were doing it in the name of ISIS, and that's the reality.
Right, it was an action aligned with ISIS, and
No, absolutely. And it's not. You can't characterize it any other way.
yeah, to me it seemed like it was a media spin. Like every U.S. station was just putting a spin on that story.
Well, they already did. The
Yeah,
couple other, and I don't want to. I don't want to go too far. I don't want to say other ISIS attacks. It's not that. It's that ISIS is motivating people who have the same ideology. ISIS is motivating them to act, whether they're part of ISIS or not, and that's not disputable, But what I'm calling the American media on is they're not acknowledging that. So the other attacks that have occurred at military bases and against the military and against just random citizens, they're saying this is not related to ISIS, which is ridiculous. Of course it is. It's related to their ideology. It's not related to Muslims, and that's the difference. Because when you say the word Muslim, you're lumping everyone into that, but it's into a radical ideology that is part of Islam, and not all Muslims share that. And I think that's very important that people start to make that distinction.
yeah, I agree. Just like I don't consider a normal Muslim to be terrible, uh, but the extremists are quite dangerous. But the same thing can be said of
They're absolutely
the
dangerous.
same thing could be said about Christians. Like there's been periods in history or an incident here or there where a radical Christian does something off the wall, and I would say the
Well,
same with
but
I would say.
but here's the thing. Here's the real distinction. That if I had any part in, number one, my motivation is not to it's not to call Muslims out. That's the thing. I think the vast majority of Muslims are not 100% clear on the scope of how the ideology of their religion affects what happens. And I mean, I can understand that. And I think what's really important, the real dialogue that needs to happen in the world now is for not just in America but everywhere, for people to start to acknowledge and start to deal with the fact that Islam is not just a religion. And this is why we're all having problems with this.
Wait a second.
Christianity.
I'm having a brain part here. What's the difference between Islam and Muslim?
There actually is a distinction. I mean, but it's very cloudy because technically, I mean, if you walked up to a Muslim and you said, "What's the difference between being Muslim and saying you follow Islam?" you would get a variety of answers depending on who you asked. But here's the thing. If you said, what's the difference between Christianity as a religion and Islam as a religion? Here's the fact. Christianity has dealt with the theocratic issues that arose in being Christian. In other words, when Christianity became political, obviously major abuses occurred. And yet the foundations of the religion don't condone that. They don't. When people went down and actually read the text, clearly the major adherents to Christianity questioned and fought against the abuses of the political takeover of the religion. The problem, in my mind, with Islam is that separation is not distinct. The foundations of the religion are in the 7th century, where the actions of the prophet who started the religion, his motivations are unclear. I mean, it depends on who you ask. You can't totally interpret what the intention of the religion is because it's kind of bipolar. On one instance, he said many things that contribute to a very peaceful society, a conservative society, which appeals to many people. And then, on the other hand, he had actions that were very conquering. And if people will not submit to this better way of life, then violence is warranted. So how do you expect people to interpret that? You know? How do you expect people to know the difference? Like, when is it okay to use violence and when is it not? It leaves it open to interpretation in a way that Christianity does not have. It doesn't. It was used that way, but it's not condoned. It's not, you can't justify it from its foundations.
Yeah.
I mean, because when you go back into the text, and people do say, yes, let's go back to the Old Testament and show how God was okay with it. Well, that was a long time ago. And then when he actually came, he said, it's not okay. I'm changing it. It's not okay. And it seems like for hundreds of years that that manifestation occurred. I mean, people were willing to die. But think about the difference. A martyr to Christianity for hundreds of years were that they were willing to die for the faith, but they weren't willing to kill. And I think that is the biggest distinction and what people need to understand. I am not saying that anybody who adopts the concept of Islam and they look at the positive, they're not always willing to kill. Of course not. And I think it's a legitimate expression of trying to be religious. But what they can't get around, and this is what I think is most important for people to understand, is that within the religious text, within the history of the spread of Islam, is that violence is recurrent. It is recurrent. It's like a flare-up. It keeps happening. It has not stopped. And here we in 2015, heading into what we consider the most enlightened period of human history, and ISIS is running around cutting people's heads off like it's the 7th century. I mean, come on.
Well, if I could interject for a minute, did you know that Saudi Arabia does the same stuff?
I have heard that.
It's true. I researched it. I'm like, I'm not entirely sure it's such a big deal. I mean, we fry people in electric chairs. We hang people. Each country, just like they have their own creed and religion, they all have their like preferred method of execution. I'm not
Okay.
being a dick, but I think.
So what are we talking about?
Oh well, I just kind of got sidetracked on the cutting the heads off.
I mean, you understand. I'm not saying that one society is perfect, and not one society has not had abuses. And here's what I think is really important to say about that. We're not arguing manifestations of or applications of what should be. I think what I'm at least trying to argue is that ideologies matter. Okay?
Yeah.
And the problem I have with Islam is that it is bipolar. I've read through the Quran, and it's very murky. Absolutely, I can see where anyone could take the positive text. It sounds really good, and I understand that, and I admire the culture that has developed in many countries in the Middle East. I mean, people are just going about their lives. I get that. But that's not always the case. And the problem is that they're just going about their lives and trying to evolve, and then they keep getting interrupted with this horrible violence. And where does that come from? Where does it come from?
Or do you
You
think?
can't say it's just the religion. I get that. It's not just the religion. I mean, there is a human innate barbarism that comes out, but under what conditions? Under what conditions? And what suppresses that? Like, what creates civilization? And here's my point. When you contrast Christianity with Islam, here's the ultimate point. Christians might miss the mark. They might do horrible things. And they might even do it in the name of God, but they're not justified. I mean, the Bible calls them to account. It says what you have done is wrong. It's a little bit more murky when you come to Islam. When you look at the Quran, I can't even get anyone that I've ever asked to come to some actual conclusion on what the Quran says about spreading Islam and quelling the infidels. It seems like the whole point of what they're saying is it's justified if it's better for everyone. Well, what does that mean?
I don't know.
So, if Islamists come in and say, oh, this society is corrupt, it's almost like they have a mandate. It's almost like the Quran is saying it's okay to kill them because you're being merciful, because they're obviously suffering. Like, they're not living according to what the Quran says. And yes, if everyone was, then sure, the violence wouldn't be needed. It wouldn't happen. I mean, I am not suggesting that the Quran says just be violent for the sake of violence. They're not saying that. They're saying if they encounter a society that is corrupt and sick in their mind, that they're actually being merciful to kill them. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's where it gets really confusing, because who's the judge of that? You know? Who is the judge?
Depends on
and
what
I
you
think
believe.
that's where a lot of this comes from. It's not random violence. It's calculated. It's scary. And it's very indistinct. Does that make sense?
Yeah, indistinct violence.
It's indistinct because there are no rules. I mean, not really. And that is why you can have a mosque where an imam is preaching peace, and he means it. And I don't doubt that. But what about the next one who isn't? And they're in conflict. I mean, that is the conflict that has occurred in the Middle East. I mean, they're not in agreement with each other in terms of the religion. And I might as well enter in on this. I mean, even Christianity, where there is no allowance of violence. I mean, think about it. In the text, what justification can someone come up with for violence as a Christian? You can't. It's not justified. I actually heard a Christian one time say, well, I mean, the Bible clearly says an eye for an eye. And I was like, you don't really understand the Bible. But it kind of shows the difference between the text of the Bible and the Quran. It's more confusing to people. Because in the Bible, at least for people who study it, they realize that, yeah, when things were much more barbaric back in the day, certain things were allowed or at least overlooked. But when Jesus came, he said, that's enough. That's it. This is not condoned. It's not okay. I call you to a higher law. I mean, I'm just saying, if you accept Jesus as a real prophet, and if you accept him as a Christian, as God, he is not condoning vengeance whatsoever. At all. Whereas in Islam, it's a little bit more murky. It's like there are conditions where it is okay. I mean, it's not okay. It's not a rampant, like, it's okay to just run around and cut people's heads off. But there are texts that say it is okay under certain circumstances to be violent if it's for the good of society and if it promotes Islam. Well, don't you think that would be really confusing to people to, like, figure out when it's okay and when it's not?
Yeah, pretty much. Who's to judge which way it goes?
Yeah. Let me take a verse from the Bible that is kind of like not debatable, but let me change it slightly and show you what I mean, right? When Jesus says, when he says, anyone anyone who kills their brother knows nothing of God. That's pretty cut and dry, right?
Yes.
Pretty cut and dry. But what if he said, except if they don't believe in me? Huh?
That totally changed the dynamic.
What would you do with that verse if it said, anyone who kills their brother knows nothing of God? But see, he didn't say, unless they don't believe in me. And that's kind of what I feel for people who follow Islam, because they have to navigate ambiguous parameters. It's like, well, when is it okay? Like, when is it okay to use violence? Because it doesn't prohibit violence. It actually says violence in some circumstances, not all, but some, is warranted and it's okay. It's actually a holy action. And I get it, that the average person looking in on that says, well, didn't the Old Testament say the same thing? Well, yes. Yes, it did. I would be the first to acknowledge that. It sure did. And it's still confusing the Christians today. But the difference is, they can't call themselves a Christian if they don't realize that Jesus made a very sharp line. He said, that's it. It's over. I think he pretty much summed it up when he said, vengeance is mine.
Ezekiel 25:17.
Well, I'm not a chapter verse person.
Neither am I.
But I know he said that. And he said, he made a lot of statements. He said, it's not about peace, but him saying it's not about peace is not condoning violence.
Oh, hold on a minute, Arabella. I wanted to read to you Ezekiel 25:17. Keep in mind we got about 2.5 minutes left in the episode. It says Ezekiel 25:17, and it says, and I will execute great vengeance upon them with furious rebukes, and they shall know that I am the Lord when I lay my vengeance upon them.
There you go. In other words, by the way, Ezekiel is Old Testament. Keep in mind there. But that is God talking. His point is that vengeance is his.
Right.
The challenge, no, listen to this. The challenge to a Christian is that you are not to take vengeance into your own hands. It is the Lord's only. And that is very different. It's not political. It's not, and ultimately, here's the other thing that our country needs to come to grips with. We have a constitution that is unique in the world. And I get that we can either keep it or lose it. I get that. And it's going to be weird if we do. But nonetheless, it is unique. And you can't say it's just Christian-based. I mean, people who say that's not true. It's based on Christian principles, but it is not. We are not a Christian nation. We are just a nation, and we can go south in a heartbeat by losing our own ideology. This entire conflict that's occurring, I think people need to understand, is not ultimately religious. It's not.
Well,
it's a conflict of ideologies.
Arabella,
But we need to understand what
hold
those
on.
ideologies are based on.
Hold on, Arabella. We got about a minute left on the episode. I'll let you have the last word.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, that's putting me on the spot. I think I pretty much said it.
Well, we're already at 30 minutes. So, thank y'all for listening to this new YouTube production. We'll be posting episodes at the new channel, which will be established, and we can give you more information in future episodes. Today is December 13th, 2015 AD. Have a happy and safe holiday season. Take it easy.